So, listen, when you're talking about the input from different people, and that just someone can surprise you, I think this is, for me, is where there's the real value in diversity.
Yes.
Now, diversity is obviously, it's about fairness,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also about the fact that people from different backgrounds, people with different ideas, people with different experiences, people from different places, etc., 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 they can all shine a slightly different light on things.
Yes.
And I really like seeing where organizations appreciate that from a commercial point of view and a strategic point of view, in the sense that they're not just doing a box ticking exercise. They're realizing that diversity is what makes the world go round, because it's just all the different ideas from all the different people. And so there's huge power in that. I also think there's huge power in leveraging that diversity within the supply chain as well.
Agreed.
As an extended part of that kind of overall workforce. Obviously, that the same applies on the kind of goods and materials side as well. But I think specifically within services, where organizations are, it's a people orientated scenario, delivery of work scenario. It allows that direct input and allows a range of different inputs from different specialist suppliers, suppliers from different backgrounds, and suppliers of different makeups. What's your view on how organizations could or should be leveraging that versus how they maybe are?
So I would actually say this is one of those areas where procurement has both a massive opportunity and a huge problem at the exact same time, right? So we're trying to, as you just said very well, we're trying to achieve all kinds of diversity. And there's a lot of research that proves that more diverse workforces are better at problem solving. More diverse supply chains are more resilient, right? There's all kinds of correlations and tangible benefits to that. So procurement has a huge opportunity to be on the right side of this and really lead change. And we can do that through looking at company ownership. We can do it by looking at the location of companies. We can do it by looking at boards of directors and the diversity of their workforce. So there's all of those ways we can approach it. I think the problem that we have, and I'm going to throw myself right on the pile on this because I am definitely your stereotypical procurement thinker. We say, okay, this is what we need to do. So we need metrics, we need frameworks, we need boxes to check, we need certifications. Somewhere in all of that, the spirit of what we're trying to achieve has a way of getting lost. And I'll actually use this happens to be a public procurement story, but it's from right here in the Boston area. The state of Massachusetts was contracting for a service, and because they rightly wanted to make sure there was diversity in the supply base, they said, okay, if you take on this contract for us, it is a services-based contract, X percent of it, I don't know, 30% of it has to be either subcontracted or supported from a supply chain capacity by a certified diverse supplier. Great, right? Well, unfortunately, here's how that played out. One of the suppliers who submitted a very competitive bid said, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. And they explained in the proposal why they weren't. And so they lost the bid. And that might seem fair on paper at the highest level. The problem was the reason they said we're not going to sub that out and we're not going to do that is because that supplier was a 100% woman-owned business. And because they said, no, look, if you do the business with us, 100% of this contract goes to a certified diverse supplier. But because the system was set up by procurement to say, okay, did they check the box? Did they say yes to question, 42 part C? Because the answer to that was no. Nobody dug into the details to read the comment to say, hey guys, did you just happen to notice 100% of the spend would go diversity in this case? To me, that's a cautionary tale that has always stayed with me because we're trying to achieve so much so quickly. And in order to do that at scale, we have to have some of these frameworks. We have to have lists of pre-qualified diversity suppliers, or we have to have targets or reports. But at the end of the day, it's a people problem. And it's a people problem that has to be solved by people in a somewhat inefficient way. I think sometimes if we completely emphasize efficiency over all else, we have a way of driving out the messy secret sauce that actually makes things work better. And so it's again, just like the pause before the comment on social or sending that email to your boss. It's the pause saying, okay, we're trying to create this system. Is it accomplishing what we need it to do? So we're going to try. We're going to build a report. We're going to build a dashboard. We're going to set some targets. Let's 3 months in, 6 months in. How is this actually playing out? Are we making progress? Are we having the conversations that we need to have internally? I think so much of it is around language and procurement, having the words to have those conversations. And hey, I'll be the first one to admit, again, dealing with people, I love people, we're messy. That's what makes us fantastic. Sometimes talking about these diversity related topics makes us nervous if we don't have a lot of experience doing it. It's not a reason not to have the conversation, and it's not a reason not to make progress, but it does make it incumbent upon us to get the education we need, to have the relationships with people to say, hey, listen, you know what? Keep me honest here. I'm trying to do the right thing. Here are our goals. Let's maybe define the terminology that's acceptable. Let's define some of these acronyms and make sure everybody knows what they mean. To me, and maybe it is my writing background, I always go back to the power of communications in actually affecting change. And I think sometimes it's almost like if we try to roll things out too far, too fast, we don't get anywhere at all. We would be better off going a little bit slower and having it be a little bit unsteady, but actually making some gains. I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to separate the companies that pay lip service to this notion of diversity from the companies that get in the trenches and do the work and have the conversations and make a meaningful difference in all of these different communities that they're trying to access.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree with you. And I think it also has a bearing on innovation.
Yes.
In the sense that, where you are dealing with more diverse suppliers and more diverse viewpoints and, cognitive diversity amongst everything else, almost experiences, backgrounds, whatever it might be, it's all adding to the ability to create new ideas and have a different viewpoint on it. And I think for organizations that try to formularize it too much, that becomes very difficult. You can't really force these things. And I think when an organization is looking at its supply chain, particularly on the services side, where there's generally very poor visibility,
yes,
particularly of the smaller suppliers, there could be some real gems within that supply chain that aren't being appreciated or that aren't really understood properly. So I think you're right. Certain things need to have a structured, formulaic approach. You have to have structure, particularly within big organizations. But within that, there needs to be these people interactions.
Yeah.
Where, and this is something that procurement have a real opportunity, as you say, to use their people skills, which procurement have all great organizational skills, but also fantastic people skills generally, to be able to understand suppliers. And, I had a conversation recently where someone was just really drumming home the point that innovation doesn't work very well if you just sat down there and had a quarterly business review of the supplier, absolutely hammered them, driven the cost down a load of stuff and said, right, final point on the agenda, what's your 3 innovation points for today? It's just, it doesn't work in that kind of like conflict type situation. So I think information is something that's very important, to surface the information. What suppliers have you got? What's happening in your supply chain? What work is going on that maybe you're not getting that much visibility of? But as procurement, you need to understand what that is, because there might be some really good opportunities there that you're not taking advantage of in other areas. But also it needs to have those relationships to tease out the valuable things. As you say, within the example you gave, it's nuanced, and it has to have the opportunity to have nuance there.
Absolutely. And innovation is supposed to be messy. I mean, if it were easy, then it's not innovation. Then it's just a linear progression of what's already being done. Oh, look, kids like bread more without crust on it. So we've, invented a way to make bread that has no crust. That's not innovation, right? That's just taking it the next step and doing sort of like a market testing type thing. For innovation, I always mentally, the image that always comes into play for me is that scene from Apollo 13 where they're trying to figure out how they're going to get Tom Hanks home, and they dump all the parts on the table. And they're like, listen, geniuses, this is all they have. Fix it. And in some ways, I mean, they were forced to do that by the circumstances. To me, that's innovation. And in some cases, we have to find ways as procurement teams, as companies, as partnership pairs, us with our suppliers, with our stakeholders. Say, okay, listen, what does everybody have they can throw on the table? Like, does it bring some piping, right? Bring your cousin. Okay, he's got a box of Oreos. Like, we've got this problem and we're trying to solve it in a different way than anybody has ever solved it before. And not only do you need to know what every single person's resources are, you need all those different perspectives. You need somebody to go like, okay, hey, if we give Sal the Oreos, and then, right, you're all going to come to that differently. Everybody has different experiences that has brought them to procurement. I think that's one of our great strengthening factors. It's not the bread without the crust, right? Nobody grows up and says, I want to be in procurement when I'm older, right? And then follows okay, that means in high school, I do this, and in college, I do this, and I do that grad school program, right? And good for finance and good for marketing, right? They've got that figured out. But procurement, we've got somebody from operations and somebody from logistics and somebody from finance. Oh, and we also probably have an art history major. We may have somebody that was a philosophy student. Put all that on the table, because at the end of the day, we're trying to solve problems that require engineering, that require cost modeling, that require human interaction, that require strategy and sales skills and the ability to influence. And I think if we can find some way to go back to that productive tension between our desire to organize and create frameworks, right, and make it very structured, with sort of the fact that all the parts don't necessarily line up, that gives us a natural advantage. If we can find the energy and the time to be creative, it gives us a natural advantage to solve some of these enormous problems that go far beyond supply chains and far beyond, exactly how much does it cost for us to put this product on the shelf. This is where we're getting into the area of having all different kinds of community impact, which is incredibly powerful.